Okay, we're told, so maybe capitalism is efficient. Maybe it generates more wealth than other systems. But what about values? What about things that can't be measured in cash? Things like kindness and loyalty and integrity. Well, let me say something that you won't hear very often. Let me make the moral case for capitalism. Let's go back nearly 12,000 years to the moment when one of our ancestors made a world-changing discovery. It turned out that if you left seeds in fertile soil, plants would grow from them. Instead of having to forage, you could produce your own grains or fruits where you wanted. But it didn't take long for someone to make the next discovery. Rather than spending all year tending to your own crops, you could wait for your neighbor to bring in his harvest.
What are the odds this is just going to be defending markets and not defending capitalism, Ben? I don't know if you guys
like teetering on 100%.
Okay, because there's
like I want to see if we're actually going to get a defense of private ownership of the means of production. Like are we actually going to get some sort of defense of the separation of labor and capital in this video, or is it going to be just like letting people exchange money for goods and services is good?
Yeah, he's from the Putin school of apologetics. Let's go back 12,000 years.
Yes.
There's a man named Rurik and a man named Ronald and Rurik. All right,
I mean, this is the I saw that meme with like it's the like gaunt crying like line drawing meme being like, please talk about right now, and line drawing of Putin being like, as I was saying, at the court of Yaroslav the Wise.
All right, let's see.
And then steal it. And then came the truly diabolical discovery. If you wanted to maximize the ratio of effort to outcome, you could organize a gang of thugs and seize not only your neighbor's harvest, but everyone's harvest, regularizing your plunder through tithes, tolls, and taxes. And thus it continued until roughly the end of the 17th century and the birth of modern liberal capitalism.
Wait, that wasn't capitalism?
Premonitions before then, little tremors of freedom, but almost everyone on the planet still lived in servitude and penury. Every previous society was based on systematized oppression. Ruling elites would use the institutions of the state to loot its resources and then rig the rules so that their children would inherit the same privileged position.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't want to just be flip or whatever, but
yes, by all means, yes.
We'll give him credit. He's not just talking about just markets, right? He's going into the other direction. But so what are the characteristics he just described of the society? That there's an oppressive class of small group of people that hoards almost all of the wealth, if not all of the wealth, right? And so that was one check. What were the other checks of the type of society that we're not in right now? What else was it?
That's
intergenerational wealth.
Oh yeah, that they create loopholes and unfairly game the system so that their children keep the wealth as opposed to it going toward the rest of society.
Yeah, because I mean we all know that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are self-made men.
Yes.
Yeah. No, this is like so far what we've gotten in the first third or so of the video. Yes, exactly. Good thing we don't have inherited privilege anymore since we have capitalism. Like what we've gotten so far is that pre-capitalist class societies were very bad, which if I mean, I know that not everybody gets through Capital. It's a long book. Some of the examples at the beginning about yards of linen and ears of corn are like a little bit much, but Karl Marx actually agrees with this first point. Pre-capitalist class society is very bad. In fact, even if you didn't get through Capital, if you just read the Communist Manifesto, or even just the first chapter, or even just the first paragraph of the first chapter, you noticed it doesn't say all hitherto exist in history is the history of class struggle, slave and owner, master and guildsman, blah, 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 go through all the examples. And that was all awesome. But the problem started with capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's see. We got Timothy Chalamet up in here, ready to get
with no face.
A Bronze Age slave empire was not so different in this sense from a medieval European monarchy or a 20th century African kleptocracy, or, come to that, from those modern states that have avoided the liberal capitalist revolution.
Oh, gosh.
Oppression, serfdom, and bondage were the lot of almost every human being from the moment civilization began until an eye blink ago. We don't know how lucky we are to live at a time and in a place where the rules are above the rulers. The great Victorian jurist Sir Henry Maine summarized the move to modern liberty in 3 words: status to contract. In nearly every previous society, our relations with one another were dictated by status, that is, birth and caste. In a liberal capitalist society, we're free to make one-off, freestanding arrangements with each other without needing to ask anyone else's permission. Our agreements, our contracts, are enforced by an independent court system, and adult citizens are equal in the eyes of the law. That's it. That's the magic formula.
Okay.
Status.
Let's pause this.
Contract. Granted and...
So one of the things that's really striking about this is that he starts out saying, okay, some people, many people grudgingly agree that capitalism is very economically efficient, produces lots of wealth, but what about the morality of capitalism? Well, I'm going to defend it. Okay, defend it against who? Defend it against people who think we should go back to feudalism? Are there any of those? I mean, I don't know, maybe like the Bronze Age pervert or like
there's a few at the National Review, I think.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, certainly the implied target here, I thought, was the left, which is not historically enthusiastic about feudalism. So presumably you're going to be talking about, why, I would hope that this would be a video about why capitalism is better than socialism. And I say, oh, well, people, all citizens are legally equal before the law. It's like, well, socialists generally like that part, right? Like the argument that socialists have historically made is that this legal inequality masks a deeper inequality, right? That everybody's formally equal, that, they're equal under the law. They can make contracts with anybody, whatever. But in practice, as the burden of all those hundreds of pages of Capital is all about arguing, the underlying realities of capitalism are not as different from the underlying realities of feudalism as we would like. That even though, it's not like right out in there in the open like it was under feudalism, everybody is nominally a legally free citizen and can make contracts, all this stuff. In practice, workers have very little choice except to submit to capitalist employment contracts where, they give up their power and they have to, they have to give up a certain portion of what they produce to the capitalist in much the same way that peasants under feudalism had to give it up to the, some of what they produced to the lord, etc. Right? I mean, that's the socialist argument. So, if you, like just at the simplest level, I mean, the Karl Marx view on the transition from feudalism to capitalism is, yes, step in the right direction, but like keep going.
Yeah, this is I'm just ignorant on this, not knowing off the top of my head, but I'm wondering the theoretical work on that mystification process is interesting to me. I mean, that's Marx talks about that, right? But I'm just thinking about like the way in which capitalism is one of the strengths of capitalism, and is the ways in which it could actually like almost just like resell these same relationships as like this new thing, you know what I mean? But I'm looking for the theory base for
yeah, totally, right. So as Jemp says in the chat, right, Marx says that workers under capitalism are doubly free, by which he means that on the one hand they're free in the sense that the Prager U guy is talking about, that they're not bound to a piece of land like serfs are. They're free to make a contract with anybody who have them, but they're also free from any means of supporting themselves other than making those contracts, and thus submitting themselves to the authority of a capitalist and giving up some of the product of their labor and all of that stuff. So that, the underlying thing is that there's still a ruling class that's extracting the working hours of the immediate producers, just like there is under feudalism, which is one of the analogies Marx keeps going back to under capitalism. Like there's, I think in chapter 22 of Capital Volume 1, I might be wrong about that, but he has this like illustration about imagining somebody who's like a feudal peasant who is who's told one day, okay, good news, you're free. Bad news, the farm that you were working before is my property. And so if you want to continue to farm it in order to support yourself, you're going to have to sign this contract where you agree to give me a certain amount of the proceeds. And his point would be that like the underlying relationship is the same, right? That he's still working a certain the number of hours that he was as a peasant working for himself, right, producing food for his family, versus the number of hours that he's producing for the Lord to pay his feudal corvée, right, could just be now the difference between the number of hours that he's working, for himself versus the number of hours he's working to enrich the employer with whom he has now signed a free contract.
Yeah, but Marx couldn't have known just because of his when he lived, right? Was that, or what strikes me hearing about or thinking about this now is that still so many people buy into that, which is obviously due to a lot of the propagandistic work that goes into maintaining those ideas, you know what I'm saying? But it's interesting to me that, I guess we're literally watching something right now that's trying to, but we can't attribute it all to Prager, but it's actually a very successful mystification in a way, which is really interesting. That, we live under this is the conditions that almost everybody lives under. And, I think we're probably at a time in which, those illusions are being broken in Western, liberal capitalism a lot more than before, right? With Bernie, like when we started the show, et cetera, but still so many people don't, I think, still have it mystified.
Totally. Right. Like, and I want to make it clear. It's not all, as you say, it's not all Prager U, right? Like, it's not even just all like, capitalists controlling, the education system and the media and, everything, all this other stuff, although God knows that helps. But like, it's also the stuff that like former GTAA guest Vivek Chibber talks about in the class matrix, that essentially people, you have a sort of built-in incentive, if you don't feel like there's anything you can do about it, to put the best face on your situation, right? The more people, the more points you put on the board in terms of organized working class power, the more people are going to be open to listening to the sort of deeper critique of the system, because they actually have some hope that there's something that they could do about it, and they're not just going to pointlessly depress themselves. This is, some of this is my gloss. It's not exactly what Chipper says in the book, but I think that's roughly along those lines. Jempt, I couldn't swear to the chapter number. I think it's 22. It's wherever it's the one where he's talking about the variable capital fund. So wherever that is, I think chapter 22, but I don't want to be doing misinformation.
Guys, go check chapter 22 right now. Don't turn off the stream. But if Ben's wrong, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes. Please do chime me in the chat and tell us where it actually is.
Yeah.
But,
I do have a question though. Like, I've not read Adam Smith, but like he's seeming to say that the courts is a the courts giving people more rights is a reaction to capitalism. But I just thought it's kind of like, beginning with like the what is it, the Magna Carta, starting like the beginning of the erosion of the feudal system to allow capitalism to rise up. It was like a slow process over 1,000 years, kind of created what we think of capitalism until Adam Smith started writing about it and going, hey, there's this thing we're doing, basically. And that's my understanding. But I didn't realize that the courts was a response to capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is if you read Capital in Section 8, that part I am sure of, the part 8 of the book, where he was talking about primitive accumulation, Marx certainly paints a picture of a long process over the course of several centuries of the rise of capitalist property relations in England. He's talking about he's talking about the process of enclosing peasants and all that, and he's talking about this actually slows down a little bit under the Tudors, and it's okay, we're in a very long view here, right? But yeah, in any case, we should we're probably being unfair. Probably he addresses all these points in the remaining 2 minutes,
and the rest follows. It's the difference between North Korea and South Korea, between China and Taiwan, between Russia and Finland, between Haiti and Bermuda. In a society defined by status,
right, let's do Finland,
you
buddy.
get rich by sucking up to the people in charge. Emperors, or people's commissars, or presidents for life. But in a society defined by contract, you get rich by offering a product or a service to the people around you. As the 20th century economist Joseph Schumpeter put it, the capitalist achievement does not typically consist in providing more silk stockings for queens, but in bringing them within the reach of factory girls. When I buy something on Amazon, yes, I'm enriching Jeff Bezos. I'm adding fractionally to his net wealth. But he is also enriching me, letting me buy pretty much whatever I want without having to get out of my chair. No other economic system rests on voluntary exchange. Every other system requires coercion. And that is the moral case for capitalism. Not just that it makes us richer, though it does. Not just that it raises the poorest on the planet, making our life outcomes more equal, though it does that too. No, the moral argument for capitalism is that it's the only economic system that values dignity and freedom and, yes, equality. It disdains distinctions of race and creed. One customer's money is as good as the next's. As Voltaire put it in 1764, enter the London Stock Exchange and you will see representatives from all nations gathered together for the good of mankind. Here, Jew, Muslim, and Christian deal with each other as if all were of the same faith, and the only people called infidels are those who go bankrupt. Under capitalism, we need to think of what other people want, of what we can do for them. It's how we get ahead. Whereas socialism replaces our natural human relations with state control, capitalism draws us into productive networks of mutual dependency. We become more attentive, more empathetic, and thus more aware of the case for universal human rights. Capitalism doesn't just make us better off, it makes us better people. I'm Daniel Hannan, author of Inventing Freedom, How the English-Speaking Peoples Made the Modern World, for Prager University.
Yeah, I really like that earlier in the video, the bad pre-capitalist stuff existed from the dawn of human history to about an eye blink ago. And now when he mentions socialism in passing at the end, although almost literally nothing he says in the video has anything to do with the difference between capitalism and socialism, he says that socialism suppresses our natural human relations. It's hold on, if this is just natural to humans, why is it that we didn't have it until a blink of an eye ago?
That's a good point. He's kind of just saying stuff at the end.
Yeah, and yes, I do. As you point out, it is very telling that he wants to talk about North Korea versus South Korea, but he doesn't want to talk about Finland versus the United States, because then he might have to admit that at least social democracy, at least some socialist policies, even within a fundamentally capitalist structure, could actually clearly make people's lives better, as as there is an abundance of evidence from around the world to show. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing anywhere in there. I mean, again, he barely seems to remember that socialism is supposed to be the target, that, this is supposed to be a defense of capitalism. Again, a defense of capitalism against all those people out there who want to restore feudalism, or a defense of capitalism against people who object to it because they would prefer something more democratic and egalitarian. And yeah, he barely seems to remember that. And, mostly what he's talking about is literally just the existence of markets, which, has existed for a lot longer than a blink of an eye, right? That there have been markets in many different kinds of societies. But like, the distinctive thing about capitalism is, not the existence of, but the predominance of the labor market, right? That the way that instead of having peasants and lords, we have capitalists and wage workers. And, that's the thing that he should actually be defending if he wants to defend capitalism against the people who exist in 2024 who are opposed to capitalism. And he's just not bothering.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the moral argument too that he's trying to make, and I was like really lost as what the morals were, because he didn't really, he went through all the history and then kind of forgot to tell you what the point was of all of it.
I thought. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd think he would at least be playing the hits about like Stalin and all that, right? Like, he doesn't even bother with that. I mean, it'd still be irrelevant arguing against democratic socialists at about the same level as, like, it would be silly if you were arguing about religion with Southern Baptists to like start bringing up like all the bad things the Pope has done, but like, but at least that would be, you'd understand the point. Like, the only real moral argument I heard there was, well, because it allows freedom of coercion, therefore there's freedom of contract, therefore there's no coercion, and coercion is bad. I think that's the only moral argument, is that kind of libertarian one.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think that the work he would have had to have done is to connect democracy to capitalism, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like that was basically just asserted. Yeah. Which is, normally and then I guess a little bit at the end, which is like, although I think they like Russia was included, right, in one of the bad countries, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so. But the point is that like, it's not an argument that I would agree with, but at least that's an argument of like connecting those, free and voluntary transactions and contracts with political democracy, right? Which is what he was doing by strong implication, but he didn't really prove that those two things are necessarily connected. And I think we actually, have a lot of historical examples in which they're not necessarily connected, right? So
the idea that capitalism is inextricably connected to political freedom and democracy would be a hell of a surprise to the surviving family members of Salvador Allende. But in any case, look, probably want to duck out a few minutes early. Going to try to make it to a concert tonight. So this is by our post-game guest a couple of weeks ago. So in any case, but
Cuba's doing a rap show. That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
DJ Deep State.
Yeah.
And last two things I've got about this are one, it's obviously a point that's been made in the show many times, but I think it's always worth making one more time that that when you make this argument about coercion, you're just like the conjurer's trick here is you're just pretending that that coercion only counts if it's the kind of coercion that's illegitimate according to your libertarian theory of property rights, right? So all the other coercion doesn't count, right? Like a few years ago, Hadass Tir, who's the author of what's called like the People's Guide to Capitalism or something.
Yeah.
It's and I were both guests at this conference kind of thing where it was the Hannah Arendt Center at Bard College and the Mercatus Institute at George Washington, which is the second one of those. It's like a libertarian thing. And so they invited me and Hadass to spend a weekend, at panels and stuff, arguing with a couple of Mercatus libertarians. And there was a point I remember in one of the discussions where I was like, and they were like undergrads who applied to go to it. And there was a point in one of the discussions where I was like, what? Hold on. Like, let's think about like evictions, right? If you're, think about what goes on when like a landlord evicts somebody you're literally sending armed agents of the state to force people to leave their homes. That's not coercion. And I remember like some of the people were really like, well, no, but they really couldn't like articulate why not. Right. Like it's, because like really what they mean is like, yeah, but that's the kind of coercion I approve of because it's like enforcing property rights. But it's like, well, look, anytime you have a limited resource, you are going to be, like unless there's just chaos, you are going to be enforcing some people having access to it and other people not, right? Like that's going to involve coercion. So it's like coercion versus no coercion is never the real issue. That's always a red herring, right? The issue is always what distribution of resources we're coercively enforcing. And, this guy likes the distribution that makes, Jeff Bezos rich enough to have his own spaceship while the Amazon warehouse workers, often get second jobs and are so desperate to make quotas that they're peeing in bottles. It's like, all right, I don't particularly like that one, but can we just argue about the thing itself, which is like what distribution to enforce instead of having this pseudo argument about whether there's enforcement going on? Because, yeah, of course, there's going to be enforcement going on. You're always going to be enforcing whatever the distribution is. The question is what distribution to enforce. And if you want to actually intersect with the objections that leftists and socialists make to that, you need to be talking about class relations under capitalism, which is a subject that was not broached whatsoever. The only way it was hinted at was that Schumpeter quote at the end. They said something about factory girls. It's like, oh, what are these factory girls? Tell me more about them.
I think I know you're running. The quick thing I had is just, we talk about, this is, very clear if you're kind of into this stuff, but if you're not into this stuff so much, I think it's important to realize if you're curious about socialism, that the idea that, hey, capitalism has kind of like lowered inequality and raised the floor from feudalism, not controversial on the left at all. You know what I mean? So if you do that, you haven't really proven anything, right? The idea, the way I see it more, right, is like, well, is a modern, and also if you go to like a modern capitalist democracy, from some kind of like extremely low GDP type nation, like are things going to be better for the citizens? Probably, right? To me, the most interesting question is like, is this the best we can fucking do as a society? like what we have in America, or even Europe, and is it? And I think probably not. Or if so, that's
that's a tragedy.
Kind of sad.
So, right?
It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad, right?
Yeah, if this level of inequality still represents the very best humanity can do, that is incredibly depressive and should be a source of great shame to us as a species. Last point, I want to own my mistakes on the show and do better. So apparently it was chapter 23 is what I was thinking of, not chapter 22. So I'm not going to duck this. I'll accept it, responsibility, and move on. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron exclusive post games on Monday nights, all of the patron exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more. Go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.